You're listening to the Digital Child Podcast, brought to you by the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child.
Every now and then, a new toy comes onto the market that stirs up controversy and debate amongst parents. Recently, an Australian supermarket chain released a new range of wooden toys, including a vlogger playset, and has raised questions about how children should be growing up in a digital world. Hi, I'm Tama Leaver, Chief Investigator in the ARC Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child. In this episode, we're chatting to Dr. Amanda Levido, a research fellow in the centre and an expert in media literacy education. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So Amanda, for those who haven't seen the vlogger set, can you describe what it looks like and what's included in the set?
Yeah, absolutely. So the vlogger set has a couple of little features to it. The first one that I guess stands out the most when you see a photo of the set or when you have a chance to look at it is a little tripod with a toy block camera sitting on top and a little rope ring light that circles around the camera. So that's one piece of the set. The second piece of the set is this nifty little, and it's all, I should say as well, that it is all block type toys, blocks and ropes and things like that. So a little receiver for some audio with a little cord attached with a little lapel mic that children can speak into and pretend that they're recording what they're thinking as well there. And then the third part of it is a little device that looks a little bit like a teeny tiny little mobile phone with some little icons on there to, I guess, sort of simulate either a mobile phone or some kind of other tablet device.
Right, so that all sounds pretty harmless to me. What's the initial reaction been like with parents and the public?
I think the initial reaction is a little bit of shock as to why a toy like this exists in the first place. So when I've seen it on social media a couple of times, so this toy, although we've seen it recently, I remember it coming out last year as well. So, and I do remember seeing on social media, in both instances, people being, I guess, confused as to why a child would want to play with a toy like this. And I guess sentiments around it not being a toy that children should play with or not a toy that's valuable to children.
Okay, so we know that a sense of moral panic or fear can sometimes come about when it comes to new and unknown things. So like influencer culture and vlogging, which we know has actually become quite a significant industry now. Do you think the sort of initial reactions stem from a stigma attached to the idea of vlogging or influencer culture as somehow a profession or a career?
Yeah, and I think, maybe we need to start thinking about that distinction between a vlogger and an influencer, because I think most of the outrage that I saw online was really not so much talking about the vlogger as a vlogger set, but talking about how children can become influencers through the use of the blogger set. So I think that's where that kind of moral panic comes from, is around really not wanting to for children to be seen as a commodity. And I totally understand why some parents would be cautious about engaging in some of these practices. But I do think we kind of need to distinguish a little bit between what an influencer does and what vlogging as a different type of practice involves.
Given that vlogging has been around for more than a decade now and is definitely sort of here to stay as part of our culture, for adults, children as consumers, and indeed as producers, it seems reasonable or seems not out of the ordinary for children to aspire to become YouTubers or vloggers or even influencers if that word has sort of a different weight. So it seems sort of reasonable to think that kids would love to play with a toy like this that speaks to some of those aspirations. So I guess what's your advice for parents who do feel unsettled by this?
Yeah, I think I kind of hear from families and parents anecdotally that they kind of hear more around their own children and their children's friends talking about really wanting to be a YouTuber and those sorts of things more often, obviously, than they'd heard of in the past, and that they seem to think that that was a profession that was not really something that they wanted for their children. And again, there's lots of things going on there, lots of reasons why parents might be cautious about that. And obviously not how many, you might know this more than I do, how many millions of channels of YouTubers are there. So not everyone who's going to do this kind of stuff is actually going to end up doing it as a profession, I suppose. But for the few who do make it a profession, I mean, obviously they're doing some really complex things as they engage with their vlogging or influencer type of practices. So, I mean, if your child does want to be a YouTuber, I think there's certainly some things that I would be thinking about in terms of, your child's privacy and those sorts of things, and who's actually having access to their YouTube channel. But I also think that it is a way for them to start to explore media literacy, digital literacy, and to start thinking about what they're actually interested in, because you can't just make a YouTube video for the sake of I guess you can for a YouTube video. You have to have something that you're interested in making it about, right? So it's really about exploring those things that children are really interested in. And I think kind of guiding that interest, and whether they create through making videos or they explore that interest in other ways, is probably the important part for some children, rather than the actual YouTube part. So, thinking about, although they're doing those two things together, they're kind of engaging in a couple of different practices at the same time.
You've mentioned this idea of sort of media or digital literacy. Could you sort of expand and tell us a bit more about what that is, and how even play with, obviously, what in this case is a non-digital device can be a positive part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, media literacy is really being able to engage with the media that we have access to or contribute to or engage with every day. And when I say engage with, I mean actually through media making practices, and also through obviously viewing and consuming different types of media. And in media literacy, we really want people to be thinking critically about the messages that they're receiving, the purpose of the media that they are making or consuming, and I guess just trying to reflect and think a little bit more critically about what they're actually engaging with. So, in a nutshell, it's obviously far more complicated than that, but in a nutshell, it's really about just thinking about what we're engaging with, and being a bit reflective on why someone would want us to engage in different types of media.
So is there an age where it's too young for kids to start playing with the idea of media and playing with performance? Because obviously these toys are, wooden block toys, we imagine it being aimed at pretty young children. Is there a problem there, or is that part of the spectrum?
I don't really think that there's a problem, because I think that if children are children mimic what they're seeing the adults around them doing. So, for instance, if a child was interested in playing with this particular toy set, they have to know what it is to start with. And the only way they would know what that is if they've seen that in their everyday life. So that might mean that they've had to create something for school if it's a slightly older child, or that might mean if they're a younger child that maybe they've seen their parents getting ready for a meeting at work or something like that. So they need to understand what the context of this toy is. Otherwise, they're going to, try and build something else out of it, right? So there needs to be, I guess, that understanding first. So if you don't have that kind of stuff in your home, or you don't engage in those media making practices, it's pretty unlikely your child's actually going to know what to do with this toy anyway. So I just think, I guess, that if a child does kind of engage with this kind of toy, that they're starting to think about mimicking the practices of the adults around them, or things that they've seen.
I guess if a child picks up just the phone and starts running around putting their hand up and going, "I can't talk to you right now, I'll be with you in a minute," we also know what they're experiencing.
I think it's more of a reflection of us on adults sometimes, right, than it is about the children themselves. And what that says about us and our own, media consumption habits and those sorts of things.
So I guess a slightly pointed question then, as a parent yourself of young children, would you be comfortable with you or someone buying them this vlogger toy set?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. And I've thought about it a lot, because actually when I showed my daughter the article that we wrote for the conversation, which was about this exact toy, I thought, oh, she's 9, she'll be able to read it and, look how clever mummy is. But no, she got fixated on the actual photo and was like, I want one of those. That looks amazing. So even, she's a slightly older child. She was still really interested in playing around with that. So I probably, I try to let my children choose the types of toys that they want to play with, generally within reason. And if we were at the shops and she had some pocket money and decided she wanted to buy that, I understand why parents might initially go, oh, I don't know. But I would actually let her buy that kind of toy if that's what she wanted. So I don't think that I'm going to set her up for a life of being a YouTuber, being an influencer. But I also think, it is something that she can play around with. I guess, I have slightly older children, so they're starting to play with some of this more real life technology themselves anyway at this point. So I think, yes, I would let them have it. But I also think it's important to start actually using the real things as well.
One of the things that stood out for me looking at your article and thinking about this space was that there was a report, I think it was last year, that more young people aspired to be vloggers or influencers than astronauts anymore. And I think I was just reflecting, like, I know when I was a kid, we all had rockets, but at the end of the day, there are very few astronauts out there.
Yeah, how many rocket scientists, do they actually end up being? And we kind of see, I think a few comments on the article were things like, well, I'd prefer to give my child a doctor's set or a science set or something like that. And absolutely, some kids will become doctors and some kids will become scientists. But if we give kids cooking sets, we seem to be, we're not setting kids up to be chefs, for instance. We're setting them up to cook in their everyday life. So I think that this vlogger set isn't necessarily setting kids up to be vloggers or YouTubers, but it's actually getting them to start thinking about some of the practices they're really likely to have to engage with as they get older, whether that's for school, whether that's for work, or just to actually maintain connections with people online. We've gone through a whole couple of years where the only way some children could connect was to actually have a camera set up and to be kind of doing that recording work or live work with people far away from them. So, or actually maybe not that far away from them location wise. So I think, although again, I understand the trepidation around it, some of these things are not going to go away. So I think we should be asking questions about it, but we should also be thinking, what kind of benefit is there as well here?
That's so well said. And I really do think that idea that play is part of building a foundation that could go anywhere, not just in one direction. It's not the old sort of idea that if you play with one thing, you are setting a particular path, but rather opening yourself up to possibilities. So thank you so much for that perspective. And thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Amanda Levido.
No problem.
I guess that's a wrap for our today's episode. If you enjoyed this, you can find out more on your favourite streaming service or get updates at our website, digitalchild.org.au.